And joining us now to help us read the legal tea leaves, if you will, is ABC News contributor Channa Lloyd, an attorney with the Cochran law firm. Channa, thanks so much for being with us once again. First, just want to get your thoughts on the prosecutor's rebuttal to the defense's closing arguments.
You know, Lindsay, I think she did a really good job. She was very methodical. She walked them through what the charges are going to be, what they were going to be charged with. She walked through each of the charges themselves, and she talked about the burden. She tied it to the evidence. I think she did a really good job because that's all the jury's going to be left with are those jury instructions. So to go through them ahead of time that methodically was a very good idea. I also think that her rebuttal was amazing. She actually really went through each of the points that the defense made, and she highlighted the inconsistencies, or she highlighted the things that were contrary to whatever the defense closing statements were. So that's what a rebuttal is for, and that is it's exactly what it's supposed to do.
And in her closing argument, the prosecutor seemed to really try to appeal to the emotions and almost the morality, if you will, of the jurors. I want to play this sound from the trial today.
This isn't about whether these three men are good people or bad people. That's not what this is about. It's about responsibility. It's about holding people accountable and responsible for their actions.
How important do you think it was for her to make that distinction for jurors?
Absolutely critical, because what the defense did in their closing was they very much humanized these defendants. And so anytime a jury may have some sort of emotional leanings or an emotional response to any of the defendants, this was a very smart, just really proficient way of separating the defendants from what the responsibility of the jurors are, because they are not to look towards punishment. They are not to consider it. They're not to consider any of those other things, those emotions that might tug at them when they're making this debate. So she really put their responsibility back into framework by which they should be looking at all of this. And that is in the terms of the responsibility according to the charges as listed.
In comparison to the Rittenhouse trial, where jurors only had to come to a decision about one person, how much more complex would you say this case is, given the fact that the role of each of these three men, they're all distinctly different. They all have to be analyzed for the role that they played. Do you think that that could prolong deliberations beyond tomorrow?
Typically, I would say yes, especially when the charges are different. But because the charges are the same, and they all essentially start with the question of whether or not the jury believed they were acting under a citizen's arrest law, because that determines how much of their behavior was justifiable or not. So seeing as it comes back to that base question, I think it's actually going to make it a lot simpler for the jury to come to their conclusions, because the answer to that question is going to determine the others. Because if on one hand they were acting lawfully, then the felonies are going to drop off. If they were acting unlawfully, then they start addressing the individual charges. So I think that helps streamline this verdict a little bit more for this particular jury.
And before I let you go, what did you make of that little backlash, or whiplash, I should say, with the jury when they came back and it seemed like the forewoman was ready to keep working tonight, and then all of a sudden they dismissed them?
You know, that's interesting. But if I'm reading the tea leaves according to my experience with juries, what that sounds like is they are probably relatively close to a verdict. But when she went back in there's probably a few that are definitely not on the same page. They wanted to sleep, take fresh eyes at it tomorrow, because it seems as though they are close. So it seems like, I would guess, they're down to maybe a handful of the charges, maybe one or two, and it might be one defendant that they're more stuck on than the others.
Crystal ball, you think that they're going to come back with a verdict tomorrow?
I think it's highly likely. I would put that, if I was a betting woman, I'd put it at somewhere at about 87%.
You're a betting woman. Okay. All right, Channa Lloyd, we thank you so much for your time and insight as always.
Always a pleasure, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.